Hey, welcome to the Build Physiotherapy YouTube channel. My name is Malcolm. I'm a doctor of physiotherapy. This is our first YouTube video. I thought there would be no better way than to start out our first video than by talking about preventing injuries in 2024. There is no bigger thing that will set someone back from their training than an injury. I get so many people asking me about the best program to get stronger, fitter, faster, and the reality is that even a shitty program done consistently will work better than the worst program that's never done. And outside of people just being a little bit lazy or poor compliance with a program, the biggest reason why people won't do a program is because they get injured. So if we think big picture view, looking at a training program over a year, if you get 3 training sessions in over 52 weeks, that's 156 training sessions in a year. But if all of a sudden you got hurt and you had to take 2, 3, 4 weeks off, 6 or 8 weeks off, that's a massive decrease. Let's say anywhere from 6 to 28 sessions that you've missed out on and couldn't complete because you were hurt. And those 28 sessions are sessions that you missed, your body didn't adapt to, you didn't get stronger, fitter, faster. So big picture, if you can stay healthy through 2024 and just show up and do the work, that is going to be the thing that takes you the furthest this year. So with that being said, we've got 6 key items to talk about to keep you injury-free for this year. Now, we're talking about preventable injuries. We're not talking about the kinds of injuries where if you or I go out tomorrow and get hit by a car, there's nothing that we could do in the gym or in our planning that could prepare us for that, right? The same thing if you're playing a contact sport or sport in general. There are freak accidents that happen that are outside of our control. And that's just the nature of life. We can't control that, but this video is talking about the controllable factors that contribute to injuries. So number 1, avoid training spikes. Now, training spike is a sudden increase in either intensity or volume in your program. So the classic thing will be someone goes from running 2.5K 1 time a week to then running 5K 3 times a week. They've gone from a total weekly volume of 2.5 kilometers to 15 kilometers, and they've done that in 1 week, right? So all of a sudden their calf starts playing up, their ankles are sore, their back's really sore. And while we can address those individual things, the main reason that that came up was because it was a sudden stimulus. It was too much for what the tissues could deal with, and those tissues got cranky because they weren't ready for it. And that can lead to stress reactions or stress fractures in the bones. It can lead to irritation through tendons, tendinosynovitis. It can lead to muscle strains. It could potentially lead to some extra force going through the ligaments and causing some damage there. All of these things are preventable if you take a gradual increase in load through your training program. So how do we deal with this? How do we avoid training spikes? Well, the main thing is that we need to be able to measure and know where you're at before we make any changes. So if you just start adding in volume to your training program, it's kind of like taking a shot in the dark, right? So we need to take a step back, see how much you're doing in the week or in the month, and then adjust to that. Classically in running, they'll say increase by 10% in your volume per week. I think that can be a little bit conservative. It's a good rule of thumb, but generally we want to know where we're at and then take gradual progressive steps week to week. And that could be anywhere from 10 to 15%. The main thing is we don't want to be taking 30% plus increases week to week. Now, number 2, the importance of recovery. This is actually a 3-header, so we have it broken up into sleep, nutrition, and deloads. Now, sleep is one of the most important things, and above anything, quantity is important, but quality is probably just as important. We should be getting anywhere from 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. The reality is that sometimes, because of our life demands, family demands, work demands, we can't actually get that amount of sleep in. And so the next most important thing is to make sure that that quality of sleep is really high. So the things that will improve the quality of your sleep or the density of your sleep are making sure that your environment is totally dark when you go to bed. So blackout curtains, eye mask, anything along those lines. Limiting your blue light exposure at least an hour before you go to bed, even better 2 hours before. Now I'm guilty of this too, so sometimes what I'll do is I'll throw in some blue light blocking glasses, those like yellow looking geeky glasses, and that blocks some of the blue light coming through the screen so you can still scroll on TikTok at night and hopefully not get as much blue light coming in, messing up your circadian rhythm. And lastly, you want to be in a cool environment. So typically the colder the better. Anywhere from 20 degrees and under is best. So between those three things, dark, eliminate blue light, and cold. A deload is a period of decreased intensity, normally over about a week, where we cut the intensity anywhere from 40 to 60% in our training cycle. The reason why this is important is because it allows our body and our mind to recover from hard training. In a good training program, we should be either step progressing or linearly progressing, in the sense of every week you're doing a little bit more, but that can't go on for 52 weeks, right? If your training is like this for 52 weeks, something along the lines is going to break down and we'll get hurt. So a deload allows our body to, at that highest point in that mesocycle, in that training area, to then calm down, relax, recover, and have everything compensate so that when we come back, our training graph looks like that, but we have these periods of deload where things can recover and get better. And then nutrition. So nutrition is a little bit of a, it can be contentious. There's a lot of gray areas in nutrition, but the main areas that I see as a risk factor for injury are when people try to stay super lean throughout a long period of time, specifically in a competitive season. So if you are trying to hold a really low percentage of body fat, your body is already on the cusp of not having enough to sustain the demands that you're asking it to. Not to say that you can't train if you're super lean or if you're in a calorie deficit, but it's just one of those things to be a little bit careful of. For strength athletes, the main thing is to make sure that we're hitting enough protein so that your nitrogen balance is even or even better in excess. But roughly in that strength category, we want to be at 1.8 to even as high as 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. And for our team sport or endurance athletes, there are carbohydrate amounts that we want to be making sure that we're consuming around training or post-training to make sure that you're giving your body enough to actually recover. And I'll throw a couple graphs somewhere around here. If we're talking about injury prevention, we will be less likely to experience an injury if we have enough nutrients and energy to supply the demands that we're asking our body. And naturally, that's going to be in a slight calorie surplus or in a maintenance phase. Again, I'm not saying be surplus all the time, all year to stay injury free. I'm also not saying never train when you're in a calorie deficit, but these are the things that will contribute to a higher chance of getting injured, especially when we pair it around increased training intensities and volumes. Number 3, warm-ups. Warm-ups are a little bit contentious right now because I think sometimes we can put too much of an emphasis on our warm-up where the return on investment isn't actually quite there. I think the initial return on investment, the big bang for your buck, are getting physically warm, building up a bit of a sweat, and going through adequate warm-up sets if you're lifting, or going through adequate warm-up sets of high-speed running if you're sprinting, for example. If you can do those two things, I think that's probably the 80% of the benefit of your warm-ups. We can start talking about movement prep and getting certain joints moving well and certain muscles firing well. Those things definitely help, but I think if we're thinking big picture in terms of reducing injury risk, getting physically warm and going through adequate warm-up sets leading up to your top sets or working sets is the main thing. I get a little bit peeved sometimes when I see online and people are getting prescribed or given these 25, 30-minute movement prep warm-ups for the 40-year-old dad who has to get up at 4 a.m. to train. He only has 40 minutes. Well, his whole training session just got used up in a movement prep series. And if his goal is just to move better, awesome, that's great. But if his goal is to get stronger, which we know is one of the main factors in helping people feel better and become more resilient, that warm-up has not allowed him to get the stimulus that he needs in order to get stronger and actually adapt. So we want to bracket it, right? Like, I think 5 or 10 minutes in a warm-up, awesome, but don't let it take away from the main stuff that you're doing in your training session. Number 4, addressing niggles early on. Niggles are just a little irritation. They're a little way of your body telling you that something might not be going right. My general rule of thumb is if I have a niggle that lasts more than about 3 days, that's when I'll start actually looking into it and addressing it a little bit more thoroughly. If it starts to go away within 3 days, You could chalk it up to, hey, maybe you slept a little bit weird, maybe you're a little bit stressed out, maybe you didn't sleep well for the last couple nights. But if it's still there by that third day, it's probably worth doing something about. Now that could be doing a bit of soft tissue treatment yourself, going through a little bit of mobility stuff, doing some activations. But if you're unsure, it's probably worthwhile getting a professional to take a look at it, a health professional to take a look at it, and just make sure that it's nothing bigger that could be predisposing you to an injury. Number 5, timing of your exercises. So this is a big one and something that we see a lot more in sport necessarily than with just regular training, but you should not be lifting heavy on a body part that you're gonna then train under speed in the next 24 hours. So for example, we should not be hitting heavy deadlifts, heavy squats the day before or the day of going to your training session where you're gonna be doing conditioning and 100-meter sprints. In a different application, we shouldn't be doing direct arm work, biceps, triceps, before 24 hours before doing loaded heavy carries. So in strongman, if you're doing Atlas stones, farmer's walks, you don't want to have some fatigue built up in those tissues before you strain them maximally. It's just going to increase your risk of tearing something if you're within that short time frame. Number 6, this is probably what people think more about when they think about injury prevention, but it's bulletproofing. The reason why I put it at the bottom is because these top 5 things have a way bigger impact on preventing injuries than the one exercise that you do once a week, right? So we know classically that Nordics are super effective for decreasing the risk of hamstring strains. I like any kind of eccentrically loaded through range movement that will challenge the structure. So we have Nordics for the hamstrings, we have reverse Nordics for the quads and hip flexors, we have heavy slow load isolated calf exercises for the Achilles and the calves. I really like direct targeted rotator cuff exercises, specifically in long levers, coming out this way. Direct neck exercises if that's specific to your contact sport. There's a lot of different options here, and we'll come out with videos about each of these, but the main thing is that they're accessories, they're additions to, and they can absolutely be helpful, but we need to make sure that the first 5 things are proper and set up, because if you're hitting Nordics 3 times a week, but you've also increased your weekly high-speed running load by 80%, watch out, because that could be an issue, and your Nordics aren't going to save you. So to summarize, to stay injury-free in 2024, we will avoid training spikes, dial in our recovery, which consists of high-quality sleep, nutrition, and deloads. We'll warm up properly, address niggles early on, time our exercise as well, and include some bulletproofing exercises as the cherry on top. So now that we've gone through all of that, it's up to you guys to implement that into your training for this year. Remember, injury prevention isn't a one-time thing. We're playing the long game and we're monitoring over time. So it's not one thing that you do today that's gonna change anything. So we're setting up the systems and structures in place so that we prevent things from coming up. But in the case that something does come up, we have a process about how to get on top of it quickly. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We're here to support your fitness journey with more tips, tricks, insights, and anything else that you guys want to hear about. So if you have something that you want to know more about, throw it down in the comments and we'll add it onto our queue of videos that we'll be filming. Stay safe out there. Here's to an injury-free 2024.